Welcome back everyone to the State of the Nation. Now, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe recently said that Sri Lanka will focus on stronger recovery this year after Sri Lanka posted a real GDP growth of about 5% in the last quarter of 2024, the highest in 7 years. However, you need to keep in mind that this growth is in the backdrop of Sri Lanka not paying its loans to its creditors. Of course, this means more dollars in the coffers. Now, what we really need to understand is what will really happen when we start to open up the economy. Former Finance Minister Shahan Semasinghe on this program about a couple of weeks back even said that Sri Lanka needs to open up its economy, however, was cautious in the way it should be done. Watch.
We can't have a closed economy. We must open our economy. Now, if you, even in this program, the program is designed in a such way, opening, we only have restrictions on vehicle importation. So even if you open the vehicle importation, that will not have a negative impact on the reserve position. Because that revenue is very important for us. The entire program is based on two pillars. One, we need to have a 15% revenue of the GDP, government revenue, in 2025. And also a primary surplus of 2.3% by 2025.
Well, let's get some more insights into the current economic trajectory of the nation. And for that, let's go to Dr. Kenneth De Zilwa, who's a global business cycle economist, standing by and joins me via Zoom. Thank you very much for your time, Doctor. Now, a couple of areas of focus for me with regard to the economy. The government is now mulling opening up the economy. If we take one aspect of it, which is the vehicle market, we are looking at somewhat around April for a systematic step-by-step importation of vehicles back into the country. Now, this is going to hit the reserves for sure. But the government's claim, Doctor, along with former Minister of Finance, is that the income from vehicle sales is much needed for the country. Your thoughts?
Thanks, Mahieash. Your assumptions and analysis is spot on. So there are two parts to this. One is the IMF policy framework is to liberalize. There is no two words. The government cannot avoid liberalization as part of its IMF framework. So that's the first point. So come April, you will find, as a first part, you will find vehicles being imported into the country as part of these IMF measures. The second part is where you're looking at the revenue side. The revenue side, yes, there is a requirement for government to generate adequate revenue to meet the IMF targets. And currently, if you look at the fiscal state of this country, we are still in a fiscal deficit. So we have to generate income, and the income that has been generated is through domestic compression and through domestic consumption contraction. Now, all these have put a real tightening measure on the Sri Lankan consumers and businesses and their balance sheets, and therefore the government has got no other alternative but to look at mechanisms such as liberalization of vehicles to bring about some kind of fiscal balance. But having said that, the balance doesn't seem to really work in the government's favor, because the net effect, overall net effect, if you look at the macro balance sheet, is still negative. Why I say that is because the exchange rate movement is far detrimental than the revenue that the government will generate. And if the exchange rate shifts, then I think the government will really start to feel the pressure, and we will have to have a further round of fiscal tightening to generate the exchange rate movement impact on the fiscal.
Indeed. Now the second area I want to focus is on the amounts of loans flowing so freely to the country. We keep hearing that Japan approved this much of millions, the ADB, the World Bank, and all these institutions freely giving more and more loans to Sri Lanka. The very people who screamed wolf back then when loans were taken, are now freely enjoying those loans, not for investment but for consumption. Now, this is the same path that led to 2022 crisis.
You're absolutely right. It's a dangerous move. We have seen this time and time over again, where we see multilateral agencies come in and kind of make donations, so to speak, to the overall government coffers. But these donations are all dollar-based denominated debt, and that stacks up against the overall external debt portfolio. Now, if you look at the external debt portfolio, the multilateral agency composition itself is around 25%, 27%, which is a fairly large number. But having said that, these loans do come at a concessionary rate of interest and also has a longer term nature than the more commercial loans like sovereign bonds that the government has on its balance sheet. Now, the precarious nature of this is such that the government can't go to international bond markets because we are still not really out of the woods in terms of our overall debt profile. And therefore, we have to rely on these agencies for funding for the fiscal deficit, meeting our fiscal requirements, to meet our fiscal deficit targets. So it's a dangerous precedent, but I'm quite concerned in terms of what is happening in terms of where these borrowings are being effectively used. If it's used for consumption, as you pointed out, and obviously the data does reflect that, it's far more dangerous. And I think what we need to look at it is in terms of what we are going to do with our borrowings going forward to manage our overall production base as opposed to consumption. If that happens, I think then there will be some sanity and much more deeper implications in terms of the structure of the economy, and which will turn more positive than negative. So I hope that the government will be cognizant of these borrowings and limit these borrowings into investment rather than consumption, because currently we do require significant amount of capital formation to get us out of the woods and start generating external incomes to meet our external debt obligations.
Absolutely. All right. Let's leave it at that. That was Dr. Kenneth De Zilwa, Global Business Cycle Economist, joining us to give his views with regard to the current economy.